Hey guys, welcome to SheKnowsArsenal. My name is Jessica. I'm your host. You can follow me on Twitter at JessinoTweets and at SheKnowsArsenal. Welcome to another match preview. We're going to be going through everything ahead of Arsenal's Europa League match against Sporting. What are you supposed to call them? Sporting CP. I saw somebody say, do not call them Sporting Lisbon. So I'm not going to call them Sporting Lisbon. Sporting CP. And yeah, so make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel. It's going to be a quick one. Obviously, previews are a little bit more difficult to do because we like to react to things. So we're going to do like just a short preview to kind of chit chat about, I think most importantly, what people want to know is how strong is too strong. We have a really important match at the weekend against Fulham, a team that's pushing for Europe in the Premier League, away from home. And so we are looking at, am I frozen? Am I frozen, guys? Am I frozen? Am I frozen? It doesn't look like I'm frozen. Looks like I'm fine. Let me know if I'm frozen still. But yeah, we have a very important match at the weekend against Fulham. I'm seeing like right here in the corner that the connection is unstable and blah, blah, blah. You guys know how it is. Like my internet never really works for some reason. It only really works for Terry for some reason. So let's see if I can fix it really quick. Let's see. I don't know if that'll help or not, but let me know if I am frozen or not. If you guys can see me, let me know. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Can you see me? Can you hear me? Because I'm looking at it and I look fine. Let me check here. Just want to make sure. Let me see. You guys let me know if I'm frozen or not. Let's see. Yeah, it's just like really blurry and stuff for some reason. Let's see, what can we do? What can we do from here? I'm looking at myself and I look fine, but then I'm looking at what you guys are looking at and no, it doesn't look great. Yeah. Yeah, it just looks really, really like gritty and grainy for some reason. I don't know why. Let me go out and come back in. Am I okay now? Because I'm looking at it on my computer and it doesn't look great. You guys see me? Everybody just know right now. Because I know it says the quality is really bad. Okay. Let me go out and come back in. Give me 1 second. Go out, come back in. All right, let's see if that looks any better. If not, we're fucked. Okay. If it doesn't look better, we are effed. Okay. That looks a little better. Just a little bit. Not that much better, but It's just gonna have to do, y'all. It's just gonna have to do, to be honest. Let me know if you guys can see me and hear me and all that kind of stuff. I can see that it's still a little bit blurry, but we gotta get along with the get along, okay? So, like I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted by the internet, Arsenal have a very important match at the weekend against Fulham. And so I think a lot of us are trying to figure out how strong is too strong to go in the Europa League. And for me, and you guys let me know in the comment section what you think, but it's still a chance at a trophy. I think momentum is important. I know that we have some injury issues and some players that are not 100% ready to play this week. But if you get a win against Sporting and you put yourself in a good position going into the weekend, then, if you're already feel like you're through or you're in a good position, then maybe you can rotate a little bit more at home. But I'm just afraid that, like, if you have a bad result against Sporting and it looks like you can't come back from it, what is going to be like the hangover from that at the weekend? I think momentum for me is more important than resting players. I think you do have to be smart and rest some players, but I've seen some lineups going around and it's like all the fringe players, everybody out there. And for me, I think we've seen in the past that in Europa League and in cups, when we rotate too much, 5, 6, 7 players, we tend not to be able to win those games. And so I think we should still go with a pretty strong lineup, but some key players are going to have to be rested. But then we also have the issue at center forward where we actually don't have anybody available. So it's an interesting issue. It's a really interesting issue to have because a lot of Arsenal fans are really gung-ho about the Premier League, and I 100% think that that's our priority. But it's another trophy, and momentum is key. Losing games in between our Premier League games is not going to make the team feel confident. I think you have to have that confidence, right? And so that's what we're going to chit chat about. But also, I had my friend Alex do a little bit of a breakdown on Sporting CP for us because I don't know much about them. And so he's going to do a little bit of a breakdown here. He pre-recorded it. If you guys don't know Alex, he's the Euro expert _ on Twitter. And then he's also on TikTok where he does a lot of really good breakdowns on teams across Europe that I don't know much about. And so he was the perfect person to call for this. So I'm going to go ahead and let this play for you guys. I will, kind of jump in here and there and give my 2 cents on things. But yeah, here is Alex.
For having me on the channel, Jess. Yes, I'm here to quickly break down Sporting CP for you Arsenal fans. Of course, you'll be facing them on Thursday in the Europa League. Let's quickly outline what Sporting are going into this tie like. They've got no real major injuries or suspensions going into the tie, so they'll be okay in that front. But that doesn't mean they've been great this season under coach Ruben Amorim. Now, Amorim, of course, is someone who is very highly rated and respected in the managerial world. He's actually the 3rd most expensive manager of all time. When he was bought out of his contract at Braga a few years ago, he won Sporting's first league title in 19 years there. But this season, he currently sits 4th. Sporting conceded about 10 more goals than Portugal Benfica. And yes, they have been on a bit of a run of late. I think they've unbeaten in 4 games, but they've generally been outclassed by the big 2 when they faced them this season. And you can really point these issues into their personnel. I've currently got some of their stats on my screen on my right-hand side to let you in behind the curtain. Only one player has more than 6 goals this season in the league. Them in a minute, but their front line has kind of been a bit lacking. But as I kind of touched on, it's their defence where I think Arsenal.
So Alex basically saying that, my initial thoughts on this is not a team that scores a lot of goals. And so why is that? Why don't they score a lot of goals? And how can we make sure that they don't start scoring goals against us? So hearing that did make me feel a little bit better. Like, okay, it's not like going out there and playing Napoli. They're a team that struggles to score goals. And we also saw them play against Spurs in the Champions League. And although they played good football, they were blunt. They didn't really have that cutting edge, and so that could work to our advantage.
Can really hurt them, actually. Sporting's defence, as I said, was considered about 10 more goals than the big two, but I've got some graphics that I'll pop on screen right now that show Sporting, when they tend to go forward, they can overcommit a bit, and we'll touch on that in a second as well, but they're getting caught out a lot this season on counter-attacks, on transitions. Teams are finding big gaps between their back three and their back five and exploiting that. And I'm not just talking like necessarily good teams, but I'm talking the lower teams in the Portuguese league, which is really not a position you want to be in. It's also worth mentioning that Sporting...
Okay, so we'll stop that there just for a second. That's what I want to hear. I want to hear that Sporting are going to open up. Okay, I want them to open up against us. In the last couple of games, Everton away, Aston Villa away, Brentford at home, Everton at home again, Bournemouth at home. We've played against quite a few teams that have decided, you know what, we're just not going to play football at all. We're just going to sit in our box and try to transition on you. Arsenal are really good on transition. We're really good in broken play, and it really would be nice to play against a team that's going to open up and try to play football against us. And if we could find gaps, that could be good for Arsenal, we've really come up against so many teams that just want to not play. And I don't think Sporting are the type of team that are going to, sit back in a deep block, hopefully.
Sporting's manager Amorim has not been super happy this season. When João Palhinha left to Fulham in the summer, he was quite vocal in his criticism of the board. So the atmosphere is not very rosy at Sporting. Now on screen right now, I should have Sporting's tactics at the moment, or their formation. They tend to line up in a 3-4-3. It's something Amorim's been very wedded to, and the major change we've seen this season, and this is kind of the thing you need to worry about from an Arsenal perspective, is their previous danger man, sort of in the right-hand side, Pedro Goncalves. A couple of seasons ago, hit about 20 goals and assists the year after Bruno Fernandes left for Manchester United. He's gone from playing in the forward line to dropping into midfield, and that's meant that Sporting, in theory, should be a bit better loaded in attack, because they have Pedro Goncalves using his good passing range to lay passes into the box and take a lot of long shots too. I still think he takes quite a significant...
So I'll stop it there. This is something that I saw when they played against Spurs, is that they did have players that would drop into midfield and try to slot in passes to, I think his name's Marcus Edwards, that used to play for Spurs, and some of their attacking players. I think the problem is that they probably find themselves in good positions, but they don't finish off their chances. And so something that definitely needs to be looked at. Any team can get got, so I'm not writing off Sporting in any way, shape, or form. But I do think that if this is the person, that Pedro Goncalves guy is their guy that's going to drop in, and he's basically like their Odegaard, we need to figure out a way to shut him down.
An amount of shots outside of the box, very long shot heavy. You need to close him down, Arsenal. But what's been the issue at Sporting is not only have they lost players like Pedro Porro, right wing back, Nuno Mendes a couple of years ago to PSG, their attack at the moment genuinely consists of Trincao, formerly of Wolves and Barcelona, Marcus Edwards, a Spurs boy, and up front Paulinho. Paulinho is quite a tall target striker. And as I said, none of these players... I think these players have about 15 goals in the league between them. Trincao has some moments of magic, but it's never really consistent, and that's been quite a consistent criticism of Portuguese fans this season. So what will tend to happen with Sporting is they box teams in, for example. Say if it is an Arsenal, I doubt this will be the case, because Sporting will be going to this team to counter-attack, but they could box teams in and they just don't really have the quality to unlock them, and as they try and hunt for more and more goals, they front load too much. And even with the terrific Manuel Ugarte in midfield, who is tremendous ball winner and tremendous ball carrier, it's quite easy to attack.
Alex is saying about Ugarte, but Ugarte is the one that I do think is suspended. So if you're saying that he's important, I'm glad that he's suspended. So yeah,
these gaps through the defenders, and that's probably where I think Arsenal will find most joy. And really, even though Sporting, are very prestigious, got a very good ranking in Europe. I think this is a game even an Arsenal trying to fight for the league should probably go out to win. Even in their last Europa League game, which was against FC Midtjylland, Sporting, they won 4-0, but it's after a first leg where they drew and they were really weak. They got some scathing criticism from the website Portugal, which if you want to go deeper into the Portuguese side, highly recommend you go on to. Very good, diligent website. Yeah, that's the story of Sporting. Easy to exploit in defence this season, and not easy to nullify necessarily, but they can be a little blunt in attack. There, of course, are danger men to watch out for, as I've outlined, but really, this absolutely should be an Arsenal win across both legs.
Perfect. So again, if you guys want to follow Alex, you guys can. He's on Twitter at EuroExpert_, and then he does a lot of stuff on TikTok as well. He really breaks down a lot of things, and it's funny because I've had him on the show before, and I always say this, and I never, don't take an opportunity to say this. I swear he's a Spurs fan or West Ham or something. Like, I swear. He says he's neutral, but I think he has, at least a soft spot for Spurs and West Ham, but he does really good work. So if you want to go ahead and follow him, do that. And giving us decent insight, really good insight on Sporting, a team that I don't watch every week. And I'm not even about to try to lie to y'all and say that I watch them all the time. So there you go. But let's talk a little bit about, who's available. I think that that's super important from an Arsenal perspective, because that changes everything. And the last couple of days, what we kind of spoke about was a couple of games ago, it looked like we had so much depth, in the side. We had, felt like, okay, Emile Smith-Rowe's coming back in. We have Reiss Nelson coming back in. Thomas Partey was coming back off of a short injury stint. And then all of a sudden we have a couple of players out, and then we start to look thin again. And so from my kind of like, I don't, for sure, Trossard and Nketiah will not be going to Portugal, for sure. Like, Nketiah is injured. He has some sort of ankle injury or something like that. And what's funny about that is that I'm in a group chat from the Football Terrace, and somebody in there was saying that he had a friend that knew Nketiah and said that he had an ankle injury and he was going to be out for the season or something like that. This was weeks ago, guys, weeks ago. And Nketiah ended up playing the game. And I was like, oh, your guy is wrong. He got everything wrong. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and he did actually have that injury. He actually did have that ankle injury. And I think, Arsenal tried to play him through that, but it hasn't really worked out. And now he's out for, I guess, an extended amount of time. Like, nobody's really said definitively how long Nketiah is going to be out, but we know he's not going to Portugal. Trossard, groin injury sustained against Bournemouth when he was running back on one of those transitions. It shouldn't be something that keeps him out beyond the international break, but he will not be available against Sporting. So that leaves us with like very little in terms of attack. Emile Smith-Rowe is coming back in, and he is in line to start. But as we saw against Bournemouth, he's not 100% ready to go, if that makes sense. And so it's going to be interesting to see how he kind of works out, from a starting perspective. And we also, talk about Emile Smith-Rowe quite a bit in terms of like, what is his real position? Like, how do Arsenal see him in the future? And a lot of us have our own like feelings on it and opinions and takes. But, there was some reports the other day that were saying that, Arsenal do see him as a member of the front line, but he can eventually become an 8 next to Odegaard in the future. So everybody who's trying to give Emile Smith-Rowe Odegaard's spot, you can stop doing that from here on out. They don't see him in that position. But in the short term, Emile Smith-Rowe can play in the front line. So it'll be interesting to see, what side he plays on, and what Arteta does from that standpoint. Now, we do have some good news. Trossard may be out. Nketiah may be out. Tierney is also ill and unwell, so he won't be available for the game. They all weren't in training. But my gosh, you guys, how excited were you to see this guy show up? Hello? Yes. Gabriel Jesus is in full training for Arsenal. And so, I mean, that is a boost. Like, I've never been so excited to see somebody. Okay. Like, I just missed him so much. Every Arsenal fan, I know we've missed him. And going into the, like, we're at the almost at the run in now. I don't know when the run in starts, but I would say after international break, that's when the run in is going to start. And we're going to need our best players. That's why protecting Partey, protecting Saka, protecting Gabriel Jesus is so important, because without those players, we look different, right? Ketty has done a good job. Jorginho does a good job, but it's not the same as having those players. Gabriel Jesus is such an amazing player, for us. He sets the tone. We've lost a little bit of our press. The pressing hasn't really been the same. The energy up front. He leads from the front. He also does all the tracking back. And sometimes it's like, okay, you're going too deep. You're doing too much. But I'd almost rather you be OTT than not enough. And we've missed that. In the training video, he looks sharp. But again, it's just training. So we don't really know, what he's really going to look like. But he is in full training, and word on the street is that they're going to make a decision today on whether or not he's going to go to Portugal for the Sporting game. Now, even if he goes, he probably won't be involved. When Emile Smith-Rowe, he's been in the side for a little while, but he didn't really start playing for a couple of games. And I figure that's the first step, is to get him into the squad, maybe give him a couple of minutes if we're playing well here and there. But we are going to need him. And I was listening to Arsenal Vision a little bit before this, and I thought they made a really good point that although we're going to need him after the international break, more than anything, we have to set ourselves up for a success for that period, because in April, those games are nothing to be played with. Those games are like really difficult matches where we're going to be playing up against the best teams in the league, one right after another. And before that, we have Fulham away, Crystal Palace at home, and Leeds at home. Those 3 games, we kind of need to get 9 points. So should we start to use him now so we can make sure that we win those games and don't falter? Because if we're honest with ourselves, if we've come down from the high a little bit, Arsenal have been a little wonky. We have been a little in the last couple of games. Against Aston Villa, we came back, but we were not great in the first half defensively. Against Leicester, we were good defensively, but attacking wise, we probably wanted a little bit more. Against Everton at home, we're really exposed on transition. They didn't take advantage of it. We finally broke through. We're happy about it, but we know we didn't play our best. And then against Bournemouth, although we had the great goal at the end, there's still a little bit of like, okay, well, what was that before that, And so I do think there's an element of like, we're playing well. We're nowhere near the team that we were at the beginning of the season, which makes sense because you can't play that good for the entire season. But how do we get back to our best? How do we get back to, limiting teams to like 1 chance per game? Because right now they're getting 2 big chances a game, which is a whole chance more than what we were giving up at the beginning of the season. How do we get our clean sheets back? How do we get back to scoring, 2-3 goals a game without being like under stress? How do we get back to that? And I think Jesus is a big part of that because he presses from the front. He's a real threat, and we've lost a little bit of that, So I'm wondering if, even though we really need Jesus in the run-in, do we want to use him, against Leeds and against Crystal Palace at the very least to make sure that we get those points? I don't expect him to be involved against Sporting, but like he has to start playing sooner or later, because the first time he plays, it can't be against Manchester City away from home at the Etihad. Like it just can't be, you know what I mean? But it was really nice to see him in full training. He looks fresh. He looks ready to go. I'm sure he's chomping at the bit. I'm sure he's been wanting to play. And what I like about the medical team now is that they don't rush players back. We try to like give them the full amount of time to get their shit together so that we're not re-injuring and stuff like that. We've seen it in the past with different players where we rush them back and it's like, why do we do that? And I do think that maybe Gabriel Jesus has been eased in, so we make sure that he doesn't get re-injured, but we need him because especially with Trossard and Nketiah out, we might need to use Jesus sooner than what we really wanted to, which is probably after the international break. Let's see what you guys are saying. I'm just talking now. C. Wilder says, bet he gets 10 minutes on Thursday. Errol Graham says, Crystal Palace, yes. Stefan says, thank you, Jess. We must keep feet on the ground and maintain momentum in spite of injuries. Exactly. Like, I do think that, like, momentum is so important. The more you win, it breeds more winning. I felt like when we lost that game against Manchester City in the FA Cup, we lost a little bit of something there, and we just have to kind of keep it up at this point. We do have to strategically rotate the squad, but not so much that we just are throwing the competition. And I do think to a certain extent, once we get into 6-7 changes, we are throwing it. And we're going to already be enforced to change things because of injuries. So we're going to have to be stronger in other places. Triple C says, hi, Jess. How would you rate our title chances? Last couple of performances haven't been up to par. Have the levels dropped for a bit of concern? I think I do have a little bit of a concern. Not that I don't think that we're playing well. We were playing out of our minds at the beginning of the season, before probably all the way up until we played Manchester United, which was at the end of January. So from August to the end of January, we were playing out of our minds. Okay. And so, nobody's going to be able to keep up those levels, the entire season. It just doesn't happen. But you also don't gain that form back without making changes and doing things strategically to get back there. And I think we have dropped the levels just a little bit, but we've also had players come in and out of the squad. We haven't had the same 11 every single week. Players are getting tired. Things are changing. And we've been able to maintain our position throughout that, but we have to figure out a way to get back to what we were at the beginning of the season. We were so much fresher at the beginning of the season. We were pressing. We were first to every single ball, every single second ball. We were defending much better than we were now. And I think some of it has to do with the fact that teams are now sitting back on us. Now that, we're getting more respect than we were at the beginning of the season. And also teams are desperate. They need those points just as much as we need those points. And what I feel like I'm seeing is teams are backed up into their box, defending, and then hitting us on the break. And because we're desperate to score, we have 2 men back. And then it takes one pass, one bad touch, one bad pass from us for them to take the ball, kick it down the pitch, and then boom, they're in our box. Boom, they're in our box, And so I just think that, like, some of it is the opposition, but some of it is also that we don't have Jesus, and we're kind of wearing, like, we've done okay, but we need him back. Thomas Partey's been in and out, and that's what it feels like to me. And so if we just assume now that teams are going to play like that against us, how do we make sure that that doesn't happen? Well, defensively, we have to be better, because giving up goals in the first couple of minutes of games and then teams being able to sit back and defend those goals is starting to hurt us. You know what I mean? Then, maybe we, like, Jesus just gives us something different. Low blocks cannot handle players that dribble through. Because you have to make a decision. Either you foul them or, you move their pieces around. I think we've lost a little bit of that because Nketiah doesn't really have that. Trossard was kind of trying, but now he's injured. And so, yeah, I think, it is a little bit of a concern. I think the way that we give up goals at home is a concern for me, because we're not always going to outscore everybody, and it's putting us under a lot of pressure. So it's something that needs to be worked on for sure. Errol Graham says, where do you broadcast from, please? I am in England. So yeah, it's cold and it's snowing and I'm not happy, but hey, what can you do? Boy says, Trossard and Jesus together will break these low blocks. I think that's a really good point. Trossard does do some of that dribbling and that ability to move people around like Jesus does. Not quite as good, but we really miss that against those deep blocks. And if you think we're not going to see any more, you're smoking, because you're definitely going to see more, because teams are going to start getting really desperate, like they weren't before. Let's see. Michael says, I'd like to see Partey and Partey and Jorginho together. I feel like he has the passes to unlock low blocks. Xhaka's levels dropping has been one of the reasons we've struggled as of late. I don't disagree. I don't disagree with Xhaka's levels dropping. Hold on real quick. I have a tickle in my throat. I think, he's kind of regressed back into the Xhaka that we knew last season, which is not a bad Xhaka. It's just not, he's not giving us those goals and assists. And he's a little bit, thinking about it too much when he gets into those positions. And maybe he's a little bit tired as well. I don't know. I'm thinking that somebody that plays every single game for us and every single game for Switzerland and every 90 minutes is probably, a little bit tired. And so it's something that needs to be looked at. He's a good player that does a really good job for us. But even as C. Wilder is saying, like, Jesus does such a good job for Martinelli and Xhaka because basically Jesus is like a double 10. Like him and Odegaard are like our 10s. And then Xhaka, he's kind of like a floater that kind of like does all these different jobs. But when Jesus was there, he could get beyond Jesus and get into those positions. And Jesus opened up those spaces for him because teams would go, would try to track Jesus back into the midfield. And then boom, you had that space open. And we don't really have that now because Nketiah just kind of, he's more stationary than Jesus was. And so, yeah, his levels have dropped a little bit. I think it's a combination of things of why he's not playing as well as he did at the beginning of the season. But we need goals and assists from that position. I think losing the goals and assists from him and then, not having Jesus, it's like you're just losing a little bit of something, but we know Jack is going to play. So the key is to get Jesus back in. You know what I mean? Stefan says, could you remind us of Trossard's latest? So he had a groin injury that he sustained against Bournemouth, where you kind of saw he was running back and then he pulled up. It's not expected to be too bad. Like it's not season ending, or it's not going to take him months. It's going to be weeks. He should be back before the international break. But he's not going to be ready for Sporting. So we don't have really any of our center forward options available to us really against Sporting. So that kind of adds to this. So what are we going to do? Let's see. Akinola says Man City is very close to us, so nothing is sure yet. When you have a team like Man City waiting for you to make a mistake so they can overtake you, yeah, we don't really have any wiggle room. We don't have any wiggle room. So in order to beat Man City to the title, you have to be damn near perfect. And at the beginning of the season, we were pretty much perfect. I think people forget that is that we were like perfect at the beginning of the season. We've kind of trailed off a little bit, but what's helped us also is Man City haven't been perfect. And so, we just have to hope that we're just a little bit better than them at the end of the season, and getting Jesus back will definitely help with that. But there's also just like, one of the best things about Arsenal right now is that we're young and we're kind of fearless and we go after what we want and we're pretty like relentless and we play our way. But we also suffer a little bit from it because we're so gung-ho sometimes that we put ourselves in difficult positions. And so I wonder if, especially at a 0-0 game state, instead of against teams in deep blocks, if we could just hold off a little bit and maybe give them a little bit of possession and hit them on the break, if that would be a little bit better than constantly like pushing, where we only have two back. Maybe leave Partey back a little bit more, because the amount of times against Everton and Bournemouth that I saw a 3v2 at the back really threw me off. I don't feel like we saw that as much at the beginning of the season. And it's putting us in a position where almost every single time they come down, there's a big chance. So I want some of those things to change. You know what I mean? But I wonder how Arteta will address it. If he'll just say, you know what, that's our best strength. Our strength is our biggest weakness. Just go after it and hopefully we come out on top, or if we'll change things a little bit so we're not so susceptible. Sally is asking, why do you think we concede more goals at home? I just think, I think because we have the impetus and we're going after it. We make more individual mistakes at home. Not quite sure why, but it just feels like there's a lack of concentration at home. Maybe it's the fans and the emotion of it, and we're just not as concentrated as we are away from home when we don't really have our people behind us. And I think we just back ourselves at home to score more goals than the opposition, but we're going to get caught out at some point. And so we have to limit the goals that are coming at home. And also set pieces. I'm not sure where that's come from. Christopher says, this is great news. It is great news. Boy says, Martinelli, Reiss, Saka as a front line is exciting. Use Reiss enthusiasm. He wants to play. Tony says, 0-0 away first leg is never a bad result. I think that we just need to not lose this game. We should win it because they're not as good as us. But I would take a draw you know what I mean? Because then you can go back home. We're much better at home. And I don't think they'll be able to take us at home, especially if we're able to beat Fulham. Then maybe you can switch some things around and maybe we could use Jesus a little bit more against them at home. We'll see. But let's go ahead and get into it and kind of build our lineup here, knowing who's available and who's not available, I think makes it a little bit easier. But I know some Arsenal fans want to kind of just say, forget the Europa League, but it's a chance at a trophy and we have a really good chance of winning this competition. And I just don't think that we should be looking at anything as like, let's just, not do our best. You know what I mean? Obviously, I think Matt Turner will start. It's the Europa League. He's our Europa League goalkeeper or our cup keeper. What I'll say about Matt Turner is that I absolutely love him. And it's not just because some of it is because he's American, let's be real. But I think I like players that come in and people are like, oh my gosh, no, I don't want him. And then he kind of shows his worth. He kept us in the game away from home at the Etihad against Manchester City in the FA Cup. He deserved much more from that tie than he was given. And so I think some Arsenal fans can relax a little bit. Some of the stuff that I was seeing at the beginning when he first came in, I was like, not sure that's accurate, but I guess it's, he's American. He can't be good, but he's more than good enough to be our number 2. And so I believe he will start. The other player that I do want to see come in is Kivior. Gabriel shouldn't really be. I would have preferred Kivior to get his first minutes for Arsenal at home in a game where we feel comfortable. But that doesn't seem to happen because I think that was supposed to be Bournemouth and Bournemouth has passed and it was not easy sailing. But you have to blood him at some point. And the Europa League is, we're at the Europa League now, so you have to play him. And if you play Kivior, what I would say is that then you play Saliba because playing Kivior and Holding for me is too many changes. You already have a different goalkeeper, then you have 2 different center backs. I think that's too much. And so maybe you keep Saliba out there instead. And then if we do well in the away time, maybe then you can play Holding in the home one to give Saliba some rest because we know Saliba is going to play against Fulham and Crystal Palace and Leeds. So, maybe you can give him some rest then, but somebody's got to play, and we got a left-sided center back for a reason. And so you got to blood him at some point. In Europe, it should be a little bit easier, but at the same time, I'm just talking out of my ass. What do I know? I'm not going to Lisbon and playing, but I'm just assuming that it'll be slower. So maybe it'll be a little bit, I don't know, y'all. We got to blood him at some point, put him in, just do it. And then at right back, it's really unfortunate that Tierney is unwell. He's a player that people have been desperate to see play, but what can you do? But at right back, I would play Ben because, again, we're going to have a lot of changes up front. And so the last thing we need is for the whole front line to be changed with players that ain't never played with each other. And then you have midfield changes because I am going to put a couple midfield changes in there. And then everything at the back is different. So some players are going to have to play. Some players are just going to have to play, and it's a hard one for me as well because I think you want to protect Zinchenko because we don't have anything similar. If he were to get injured against Sporting, I think a lot of people would be spitting up nails, but I think you got to play him. Tomiyasu, I would love to put Tomiyasu there because I love Tommy, but maybe I'm just feeling a little bit of some type of way about the way that he played in that first half. And then, I don't know, I'm going to leave it blank. I'm going to leave it blank and let you guys tell me what you want to do at left back. CM, I think this is pretty self-explanatory. I would play Jorginho here just because, you know, I don't want to risk Thomas Partey. There's a reason why we got Jorginho. We need to make sure that Thomas Partey is not getting some sort of weird muscle injury now because then he's effed, okay? These are the games that we got Jorginho for, so he should play. I would also say, play Xhaka as well. Just maybe look to bring in Fabio Vieira later, if you can. I love Fabio Vieira, but again, too many changes because everything up front is going to be changed. I'm a little bit reluctant to change everything in midfield as well. So, because I want to win this. Like, I want to win this and be able to relax when we come home. Like, I really, for me, don't want to see us chasing it or knowing that we're out or anything like that, right? So this is the midfield that I would play. And then at this because you have Emile Smith-Rowe, Martinelli, Saka, and Reiss Nelson. Reiss Nelson played really well and probably deserves a start. But without Saka, I'm wondering what that front line is going to look like because Saka's kind of like our guy, right? You know, without him, what do we look like? I don't really know because we haven't really seen it. And like even in Europa League early stages when he didn't start, I always felt like, okay, he needs to come on because we struggled, especially away from home. So do we keep some continuity and play Saka? Or do you play Reiss Nelson and give him the start because he deserves it based on his performance? I don't know. Because Emile Smith-Rowe is in line to start. And so my assumption there would be because you have to play Martinelli through the middle, that you'd have to play Emile Smith-Rowe. So does that leave Reiss Nelson in the cold? Maybe it does, you know, and maybe that's unfair, but that's what it feels like is going to happen. But I would prefer Reiss Nelson to start on the left, but you know, it's already kind of out there and journalists have already said that Emile Smith-Rowe is going to start. So I would imagine that this is what we're going to go with, you know, and then you guys can tell me what to do at right wing. Because right now, basically what you're saying is center forward is different, left wing is different. Midfield is fine because that midfield is played together before, but then you have a different left-sided center back and the goalkeeper. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 changes, or 4 things that we don't really know much about or that we feel a little bit uncomfortable or maybe uneasy about. How many more changes can you have? You know, don't we need some continuity, right? Don't we need to do a little bit of let's get those goals early and then maybe rotate after that? So you guys let me know what you would do at left back and right wing. Let's see. Thub says, I can say I would be really disappointed if Reiss Nelson doesn't start at left wing. I would be as well, because I think you have to give people something when they, you know, when they do well. And Reiss Nelson was better than Emile Smith-Rowe in that game. But journalists are saying that Emile Smith-Rowe is set to start. So what does that mean? The Inevitable says Reiss Nelson on the right wing. It could be Reiss Nelson on the right, but you know, what about Saka? You know, like Sin says, taking Saka away means we're toothless. That's my fear. But then again, we played against Nottingham Forest. Reiss Nelson did well when Saka had to come off. So I don't know. I think Saka needs to play because too many changes, too many disruptions. We're sure to see one of those games where it's really, really uncomfortable. Players are kicking it, you know, and not being able to find, you know, their teammates. I think midfield is fine because those 3 have played together. But I think Saka has to play to at least keep that connection on the right-hand side because the left-hand side might be a little janky. Akinola says, I would love to rest Saka and play Nelson. Let's see. Michael says Zinchenko and Nelson. Diallo says, Nelson, the Brazilian, if you know, you know. If you know, you know. Boy says Saka starts. It's the auto start. I'm sure when the team sheet gets printed out for this part of the season that Saka's name is on the print before the pen has hit the paper. I kind of agree with that as well. Theodox says, I would play Tommy at right back. This game is where we're going to be cautious, and I don't want to lose. Let Zinni play his game and offer us more control, help and attack. Let Tommy tuck in and defend. I think we look rinky-dink, rank and rank without White. I do. I don't think it don't look the same. I know Tomiyasu is a good player, but I am finding that I feel like that gap is really widening between the two of them. And Tomiyasu has looked, but maybe he does need playing time so that if we do need to use him, that he's ready to go. So maybe you do start Tommy, let Ben sit, and then play Zinchenko, because I think Zinchenko is like you guys already like almost like an automatic, right? As well, just like Saka. Martinelli says Vieira and Nelson. Honestly, do we think that after Vieira's performance against Bournemouth that he deserves to start against Sporting? He played almost the entire game. He played until like the 80th minute. I do think he got a little lost in it, but these are the types of games that you have Vieira play, right? So maybe you start Vieira instead of Xhaka. I don't know. Again, a lot of changes. We have to trust the squad, but at the same time, the squad has not performed well in Europe and in the Cups when there's been a lot of changes. Let's see. Boy says White is very clever passer with the ball. Tomiyasu cannot do that, and so we lose a lot when White doesn't start. Exactly. Sin says he wasn't good, talking about Vieira. Tony says, I have zero confidence on who will start in any position. J20 and Nelly are the only ones I'm 1,000,000,000% sure of. Stefan says, yes, Vieira could start. I don't know. Christopher says, give it to Nelson. Thob says, the critique on Tommy, I find, comes from a lack of understanding what he is. He's more of a center back than a right back, not the profile when chasing a game, but very good at an even game state. Rest White. Well, let's see what that looks like then. So Tomiyasu at right back, and then I just think we know Zinchenko is going to play because without him, we just look different, So you have two changes at the back, really. I feel comfortable with Tommy. I just think we lose quite a bit, but you got to do what you got to do. I do think Saka starts because he's our guy and rah. I think just the unfair one is like, I just feel like Reiss Nelson should be starting off of the left. You know what I mean? But maybe Emile Smith-Rowe starts and Reiss Nelson finishes the game. We're going to need we're going to need a lot of players to get through the end of the season. So, and maybe, you do start Fabio Vieira. Why is he not coming up? Oh, because I spelled it wrong. Maybe this. Oh man, that makes me feel so uncomfortable. Oh, I don't know, y'all. I don't know. Albert says, you forgot when White was being cooked and Tommy had to come in, he needs to play to regain his form. When was Ben being cooked? Beyond United and the 3 or so games where the entire Arsenal team was crap, I don't remember Ben getting cooked. You need to remind me of when Ben was getting cooked. Can't just me putting out these allegations without any sort of like backup. Let me know when Ben White was getting cooked. But Tomiyasu does need, I think, a run of games. He came off at halftime rightfully because we were no longer at an even game state. Like you guys said, we were chasing the game. So we needed Ben out there, but maybe, maybe he can come in the even game state and do just fine. Theodoc says, I wonder how ESR starts. I don't know. I saw like different journalists were saying that he's in line to start the game. So he needs to start well, because I know if he's not playing well, the first thing I'm going to do is say, bring Reiss on, bring Reiss on. You know what I mean? So maybe he starts and Reiss Nelson finishes. But on that side, I think what really worked with Reiss Nelson was because, he was very direct and, but maybe ESR floating into the middle and Martinelli and him switching positions, maybe thing that I've seen in a long time or at all. So I feel a little bit uneasy. Boy says Ben White only got the yellow card against an on-form Rashford, and he needed subbed off from there. He's been rock otherwise, only been shaky when the team is shaky. I agree. Sally says Xhaka is definitely starting. He was rested against Bournemouth. Well, Sally could be right. I do think that Xhaka will probably play this game because it's Europe and we need to keep some continuity. We need to keep some of our pillars in the team. And so if you have Odegaard and Xhaka, then Jorginho is kind of like, even though he doesn't play all the time, you kind of have some things that look familiar. I think things looking familiar is important. And on that left-hand side, things aren't, Zinchenko, Xhaka, those things look familiar. So even though Smith Rowe is not really the normal player, is fine. Odegaard and Saka, those things look familiar, even though Tomiyasu isn't always there. And so we need some familiarity, things to look like we've seen them before. So yeah, the Vieira Xhaka thing is going to be interesting. And if Kivior gets his first start, that will be interesting to see. Sir Nicholas says, who has Arteta typically been starting in Europa this year? I've completely forgotten. Vieira. Tierney, Tommy. They usually start in Europa League games. Turner. Vieira, Sambi was starting those games as well. Martinelli was starting quite a few of those games too, and Nketiah. So there's no Nketiah, but Martinelli will play because there's no center forward. That brings Emil Smith-Rowe / Reiss Nelson in. And then Fabio Vieira usually starts, but then Xhaka was rested against Bournemouth, which is kind of like, was he being rested so that he could play midweek? I don't know. So yeah. But in Holding, you guys, I can't do that. It's no offense to Holding, but there's just too many changes. And I just feel like if you Kivior, like maybe I'm just being selfish and I just want to see Kivior play, because Gabriel also usually plays every single Europa League game. So if we're going on odds here, if we're saying, okay, let's go back to what Arteta was doing before, because it's actually going to look more like this. How good is Gabriel, by the way, you guys? Yeah, it'll look more like that instead, to be honest. How comfortable do you guys feel now? We got it? We got it? Marco says, Arteta will play Holding. Fans don't like it, but I feel like it's what Arteta will do. C. Wilder says, no, you're right. Kivior needs to play before we are forced to use him. That's what my thing is like. Kivior needs he needs to be blooded before we actually need to play him. And so maybe in this game, it would be nice to go ahead and play him, get Gabriel a little bit of a rest, and then play Saliba next to him. Holding can sit this one out and then play the one at home if we're in an advantageous position to go through. But if you're going by what Arteta was doing before, then you're most likely to see the back line look like this. But Kivior played the under 21s, he should be getting some playing time soon. Rep says Vieira should know that stadium better than anybody else, so I'd expect him to be starting. Yeah, maybe. Thob says further away from what should happen, in my opinion. Exactly. Okay, wait, I've changed my mind. My new team is Nelson, Nelly Saka, Xhaka, Vieira, ESR, Jorginho. Maybe Odegaard gets a rest. I didn't think about that. I did not think about that. Maybe Xhaka captains the side. and Odegaard steps aside for ESR / Vieira. Too many changes. Jorginho, Tommy, Kivior, Saliba, yeah, Turner. That's enough to win. I just think it's the changes, it's things not looking the same. I think in general, we will probably see Zinchenko, Jorginho, and Saka. I think those ones for sure are going to happen. Maybe Tomiyasu comes in for Ben White. But I'm going to go with like what I want to see. So I'll put it up on the screen. Yeah. So if I'm choosing the team, this is what I'm going with. This is it. I know ESR is going to start, but I prefer Reiss Nelson to start. Xhaka, because I think he was rested to play in this match, but also you just want to keep some things the same. And Odegaard and Xhaka, those things go together. And Jorginho, they've all played together. It hasn't been amazing, but it works. Zinchenko starting because Tierney is not there. Kivior coming in because he needs to be blooded. Then you keep something similar, which is Saliba. You want that. And I remember seeing like Saliba and Holding playing together, and I didn't like it. I think it didn't go. And then Tomiyasu coming in for Ben White so that he can take a rest, and Turner coming in and doing what Turner does. This is what I would go with, but Arteta's the boss, Aganola says Odegaard for Rowe. Rep says, I want to see Kivior playing. Sin says, okay, but I'm going to sweat without Ben on the pitch. I am too, but we have to trust the squad, right? And if like Tomiyasu didn't play well against Manchester City when he got his start in the league, didn't go well, got hooked at halftime against Bournemouth, like we kind of need him to have a good game under his belt, I think, so that we can trust him going forward, because we're going to need him. We're going to need everybody, right? And so maybe it is the right thing to do to go ahead and start him in a game at an even game state, where we're not chasing it, and hopefully it goes well, because he wasn't terrible against Bournemouth. It was just Ben White gives us more going forward. It was the right thing to do to bring White in, but maybe you still want to give Tomiyasu a chance to get like a good half at least under his belt. For those of you who are asking about Tierney is unwell and he's not going to go to Portugal. He won't be involved. Akin says, what about Smith Rowe? He needs minutes. Smith Rowe does need minutes. He probably will start Akin, but this is the lineup that I would go with. I just feel like Nelson deserves the start. But we may have some of the same issues at the weekend that we have in midweek. So maybe Smith Rowe starts against Sporting, and Reiss Nelson starts in the Premier League on the left against Fulham. Who do Fulham play at right back? They have Tete, Kenny Tete. He's a very like athletic, fast, strong right back. And so maybe you do want to go with a Reiss Nelson, somebody that has a little bit, of that 1v1 ability and stuff like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too far ahead. Alistair Nketiah is injured, and so he's out for who knows how long. Boy says Xhaka, Vieira, ESR midfield trio, potentially. That feels like a heart attack, boy. Xhaka, Vieira, ESR, no. Because once you get past them, you are in on goal. Okay. I don't know. I would not go with that. But maybe, like you guys were saying, maybe ESR / Vieira comes in for Odegaard instead and gives Odegaard a little bit of rest, because the one thing I will say is that Odegaard does not usually start Europa League games, and he's also looked a little off it in the last couple of games. Not terrible, but just maybe like he needs a little bit of a rest. So maybe we go with something like this instead. Vieira starts. I mean, like you guys have said, he knows Portugal really well. He knows this team well. We know he can play against this team. It's fine. And then you start Xhaka to keep a little bit of your steal in midfield, and Vieira just steps in for Odegaard like he's done many times in this season. Not many times, but enough. And you just go with that. And Tomiyasu is kind of like the anchor for Vieira in, on that side. So maybe you see something like that. Rep says Tommy was devastated when Japan got knocked out of the World Cup. Maybe he still hasn't recovered mentally. Yeah, I think that was really tough on him. And the thing is like, I love Tommy. Like, we can't forget that like Tomiyasu is like almost our player of the season last season. It's just he's, now that White is playing right back and he's the preferred option, we see less of Tommy. And I think there is a little bit of a, it's hard to kind of see the talent through all the changes and how we play in cups, because those players tend to look a lot worse because they're not playing with the starters. But we've seen when Tommy plays with the starting 11, he's usually fine. I won't over-index like what happened against Manchester City or whatever. Those things happen, but that doesn't mean that Tommy's not a class player and we need him. So I think it is the right thing to start him, just so that he feels, one, trusted, and two, he gets some confidence under his belt. Akinola says, here's my team: Martinelli, Nelson, Rowe, Xhaka, Jorginho, Vieira, Zinchenko, Kivior, Saliba, Tomiyasu, Turner. So the exact same back line as I have, the same midfield as me, but the only change is no Saka. Good lineup. Boy says Eddie probably back next week or 2 weeks next time. So yeah, that's the thing though. It's like, I do feel like we're going to kind of be in that position where we get a couple players back and then a couple players are out. Like, I don't think it's very rare that you're going to have every single one of your players fit, so we're just going to have to get over it, Sir Nicholas says, have they given any timeline on Eddie yet? The silence is starting to get worrying. No timeline. We just have to wait and see. Thab says both Tommy and White to start, and I think that's guaranteed what happens tomorrow. If you're saying that Tommy starts on the left and then White starts at right back, I wouldn't be surprised if that happens either. I just feel like it might be this, because then you're playing players in their natural positions. I think Tomiyasu is a right back that can play on the left, but it's not that comfortable. Do you know what I mean? But yeah. Let's go ahead and do some predictions. Let's go ahead and get some predictions out there. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think we're going to play well? Do you guys think that we'll have any sort of like hangover from all the celebrations and all the last gasp winners kind of thing? Do you think that there'll be any hangover from that? It'll be hard to get back up for a game because of how much emotion was displayed against Bournemouth. I worry about that just a little bit. But let's go ahead and get our predictions in. What do you guys think is going to happen? Boy, what are you saying? 3-0 and Kedia hat trick from the physio's bench. Rep says, actually, Tommy is a CB who can play right back and left back. Fair enough. Anton says 2-2. Sin says 3-1 to us. Caleb says 2-1 Sporting or 2-2. Weirdly, I don't see us winning. Also, Jess, why wouldn't you start ESR? Because I think Reiss Nelson deserves a start off of the back of a really good cameo against Bournemouth. And I just found him to be a little bit more fresh than ESR. But how is ESR going to get fresh if he doesn't play? So I expect Smith Rowe to start. But what I would personally do is start Reiss Nelson. So yeah, Lopez says, I'm supporting Sporting for sure. Arsenal has upper hand, but we will fight back. Akinola says 2-0 to us. Boy says 3-1 Nelson Brace. Alistair Braun says 2-1 Arsenal. Wedcraft 2-0. Marco says, I feel like European teams are not scared of us like EPL teams are. Sporting won't have a low block. No, the game will be more open. 3-2 Arsenal. I would love a clean sheet, Stefan. And Nelly on target. Sir says, typically I'd be worried about a hangover, especially if it were at home. But I think the fact that it's Europa and a decent travel involved, we'll get back into it. Good point. See what else you guys are saying. I see a 2-1 Arsenal. Here's the thing. I'm going to be real. I think that my feeling on this is it's not going to be smooth sailing, because what I've experienced watching Arsenal in cups is that the more changes, the more likely it is to be disjointed, and the team just doesn't feel like I think Reiss Nelson, why it felt so different with him coming off of the bench, is it felt like we were getting a boost of energy from a sub, and I don't feel like we feel that very often. And that's no shade to the players that come in, but I do sense like a level of energy kind of drop a little bit when we play, the squad players and stuff like that. And so I don't expect it to be a swashbuckling performance from Arsenal Football Club. I do think it's going to be a little bit of a slog, a little bit of a, just try not to damage us too much. So when we get into the home leg, we're either ahead or in a good position to still win the tie. I think it's going to be rough. Not because we're not better than them, but if you cast your mind back to PSV away from home, going to the Etihad away, cup in the cup competitions with the rotations, it always feels clunky. And so I think it'll be clunky. I really, really do. And hopefully, we go out there and we do the business, but I'm actually going to go with a 1-1. I think we're going to draw the game, be in a good position to go through, but I just don't see, if we this amount of rotation, I just feel like it's going to be a little, just a little a little rough. Bob says, I think the exact opposite will happen. I think we're almost clicking, and this could be the start of a real boom attacking wise. 4 Arsenal goals incoming, hopefully. Boy says Nelson is going to be a star. I hope he signs an extension. I think he will. EK says, with our injuries up front, Nelson will get a run of games. Sin says, look, I respect Sporting, but they don't study us like EPL teams do. Ma says, smash the likes. Wed says, without Partey and Odegaard, the team doesn't tick the same way. Fair enough. I just feel like we do tend to struggle when we rotate, so I don't expect it to be like, I think we'll go 1-1, but we'll still go through when we go home. But this is kind of what I expect to see, something like this. The only difference, I think, is to be like Smith Rowe and, maybe Tommy starts on the left or something like that. But we'll see. But let's get out of here, you guys. This was supposed to be like short, but it ended up being like long. Make sure you guys follow Alex, aka the Euro Expert, on Twitter and on TikTok. He does really, really good work talking about all of the obscure teams in Europe that none of us really watch, but he tends to watch them. And so he gives good insight on the coaches, the players, all of that kind of stuff. And like, he's so in depth with it. So make sure you guys follow him. And if you guys didn't get to see that at the beginning of the show, I had a little clip from Alex talking about Sporting a little bit more in depth and kind of how they play and stuff like that. So yeah, sorry about the issues at the beginning. It is what it is. The internet is shit, but I'm still here. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys in the next one after the game against Sporting. Bye, y'all.